Hi, I'm Vicki Rakowski, and I am the head of the children's department here at LaGrange Public Library. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about weeding and collection management. A love story. I love weeding. I love trying new things to try to make our collection go. And it's something that I think we've hit a sweet spot with here at LaGrange. In the time that I've been working here, which is almost about 2 years, we have managed to increase our circulation in our children's department by about an average of 3.5% every month. Now, some months, of course, are bigger, some months, of course, are smaller, but that's the average. We had been steadily dropping before I got here, sometimes as much as 12% or 13% every month. So that's something that we really turned around and we kind of took control of, and the whole staff's been really good at working on. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about how we've managed to do that and how we approach weeding and displays and how we try to curate the collection to make sure that it's attractive to children and their families. So, first, I would like to give you some of the numbers. In general, the collection was suffering from a lack of consistency. That's pretty normal in a kid's department. A series of books gets added, but a series doesn't get weeded in its place. One selector might catalog a little bit differently than the other, so you've got some books about firefighters in one spot, but then you've got them in another spot too. And it's not that different from a garden. If you leave it unattended for too long, it gets weedy. So you have to make sure that you have a plan. It's not always the most fun thing to weed a garden, but it is, in my opinion, a fun thing to weed a book collection. So every library is different, every community is different, so your collection's needs are different from place to place. Our department is decently sized. We serve a community of about 15,000 people, but there are limits to how much we can contain. We have a decent amount of space, but we don't have loads and loads of shelving. So for us, we wanted to find a way to make our content relevant and useful to people. So for us, let's say, thinking about fiction books, if it hasn't moved in a year, we weed it. I mean, we look at every book and before we weed it, and we do run reports, and we also weed physically. So you do just a big bulk weed of a report of things that hasn't circulated in a year. If there's a good reason to keep it, like it's a Newbery, but it's maybe it's just gotten lost in the shuffle, of course we keep it. But it's also an opportunity to make sure that we're replacing books that have gotten a little bit old and dated looking. I know that they say don't judge a book by its cover, but kids do, I do. I don't think that's a bad thing. That's an honest thing. So we try to weed. If it hasn't been taken out in a year, then it goes. If we notice that it's just a little bit scuzzy and it just maybe needs a new cover or something like that, then we will replace the edition if we think it's a valuable edition. So a Newbery, for example, would be a perfect replacement item. You want to keep that Newbery. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about nonfiction with our youth services librarian, Rachel Dabke, who is the selector for nonfiction in our department. She has a really good systematic approach to how she weeds.
Hi guys, I'm Rachel, and I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about my process for weeding the nonfiction collection here at LaGrange Library. The overall plan is actually developed into this huge thing that I have made, but I love weeding, just like Vicki. It's probably one of my favorite things to do in my librarian role. So what I've kind of done over the past year and a half or so that I've been working on the nonfiction collection is I've weeded heavily. I've probably weeded about 5,000 books. Which is great, and actually our circ stats have gone up because of that, because I've kind of just been weeding the old stuff. So my process is pretty simple. If it hasn't been checked out in 3 years, it automatically gets deleted. There's no need for it on the shelf, and that's what we have a budget for, to be able to purchase new books. And so I also kind of follow a schedule, or I should say that my perfect goal is to be able to follow this schedule once I'm done with my total go through of the whole collection. It's a quarterly schedule where I'll go through a quarter of the collection and I'll spot weed. I'll go shelf by shelf and pull out the books that look ratty and see, if they've circed good, can I replace them? Although, of course, things like the Lego books and Minecraft and things like that are going to be brought to my attention before I even have to go over the shelf to look at them. Okay, something else that I do when I'm weeding is I check the call numbers for consistency. Because there have been so many selectors over the years, things just kind of got jumbled around. And, you know, so what I do is I'll take, for example, I have a whole big cart right here that I'm working on, and I check. You know, I use something like WebDewey, and I check and see where other libraries have the book. And if we have, let's say, you know, things on firefighters in two separate areas of the collection, then for better browsability and findability for the patrons, because they are children, I'll put them all together in one space so then the kids can find them. Even if it's a little bit different than what other libraries do, I'd rather the patrons have all the items together. For example, in our folk and fairy tale section this year, I put everything together. So every version of Beauty and the Beast is under 398.2 BEA. You know, same thing with all of those really well-known folk and fairy tales, just to make it that much easier for the patrons to find. I also keep a list of projects that I want to do over the year that are different from the quarterly spot weeding. So there are things like I want to go through the animal books this year, and I did the entire 600s, which was the pet books and things like that. And I've had some help creating some spreadsheets to keep track of areas that are really used that we have a lot of books in from different series. Okay, so because of all of the changes that I have made and the books that I have weeded, all my hard work has really paid off. In the past year, there has been a 15 to 20% jump in the active use of a lot of sections in the nonfiction collection, including the 600s, which I mentioned that we weeded, as well as the 900s and the fact books. I mean, it's great to see that, you know, it's okay to weed the books. It's you know, there are more books out there. Don't be afraid to weed. When in doubt, weed your books. So if I were to kind of recap and to give a simple set of instructions for someone who's looking to start weeding their nonfiction collection, it would be one, to go through your collection, you know, piece by piece, shelf by shelf. It's intense, but it's totally worth it, and you'll become so confident in your skills of weeding. You won't be afraid to weed a book. You won't have that fear that there's one patron is going to come in looking for that book and you weeded it. They're not going to come knocking on your door mad at you for doing it. You know, it'll be great because you'll have room for so many more pretty books on your shelf. I also think it's very important to have a workable schedule. Even if in the first couple of years you don't stick to it as strictly as you'd like to, if you have a goal to work towards, that'll really help to keep you motivated. Also, consistency is key, which I mentioned. You know, you want to keep your collections together. When you're working with children, you know, they do judge a book by the cover, like Vicki was saying, and so you want to make sure that, you know, everything's together. If they're looking for a book on, you know, a dog, you don't want to have them in 3 different places. You know, you want to have the service dogs and the pet dogs all together. The kids aren't going to go browsing through the collection that far apart. And then I also really love using WebDewey when I do that. It's through the OCLC. I believe it requires a login, but it's great. It'll help you to check call numbers. The other thing that I do is I take notes on what needs to be done along the way. I'll just jot it on a spreadsheet or on a Google Doc, and I'll go back to it later. So if I notice a section that needs to, you know, a really good weed, I'll go ahead and write it down. And then also utilize resources such as Novelist. The advanced search option is great for looking for new nonfiction, and then even Amazon to check for those new fact books and Legos and, you know, all that good stuff that comes out that the kids see and they're going to want to ask for. So I hope this helps you.
So, Rachel is a very, very organized person, and she does a really good job of kind of keeping everything on track. That's something that's really important to try to work on when you have nonfiction, because it's such an important section, and it's such a big section too. So she does a great job with that. She's certainly more meticulous than a lot of us, but her basic advice works across the board. Just make a plan, go bit by bit. Once you do that big weed, everything gets a lot easier from there. So, okay, I'm going to show you guys a couple of things that I think are kind of like the main goal we were always working towards. So, this is one of our aisles for our J-Fiction section. And we take a lot of care to try and make sure that it's not too tight. So you can see that we've got the shelf filled only about 2/3 of the way. We have managed to work it so that we have open space for kind of like chest-high shelving, or if you're a kid, maybe eye-high shelving. We've got every other stack sort of has that kind of space in that room to have 3 face outs, and we try to do playful things with them. For example, we might do all the same book by the same author, or this time we made an effort to put all of the books that were on face out be the color blue. So we'll do sort of playful stuff like that. We took some advice from Leah White, who is the head of popular services at Ela area, kind of by taking inspiration from independent bookstores. And one of the things that she had recommended was, if you have multiple copies, consider doing stacks. We've got 365 Days of Wonder. Of course, we have lots of copies of that, and for once there's more than one in right now, so we have them stacked together. I mean, you could do that with like books as well. And that kind of takes me to sort of the last piece of the puzzle, which for us is making sure that we market the books. So we have had a lot of success doing these end cap displays, and what we'll do is we'll take a book and make a poster out of it. So for example, All the Lovely Bad Ones. And we happen to have a copy of All the Lovely Bad Ones here right now, but we'll put read-alikes on the shelf with it. This really saved us during the summer reading program when we had like a zillion requests for Wonder, or for Sisters, or for Drama by Raina Telgemeier. So this has been a great way for us to kind of just do light reader's advisory in the stacks where we didn't have to do a lot of work for it. And that really does actually also help make the books go. We're working our way towards just making everything look nice and clean and clear, kind of like this, lots of room for face outs. And that has sort of been the secret of how we've been doing it. So if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch with me. Again, Vicki Rakowski, Head of Youth Services at LaGrange Library, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks.